I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock and we have quite a bit on tonight's agenda. So we're going to start tonight with board and commission interviews, and we have Jeff Smith here with us. And Jeff, you've asked to be reappointed to the Planning Commission. So we're going to ask you to come up and tell us why you've asked to be reappointed and what you'll bring.
Okay. All right, hear me okay? All right, I don't have any prepared statement, but I can speak a little bit. And thanks for postponing this for me to allow for my work commitment a couple weeks ago. And thanks for the service you do when we sit on that side. You know, occasionally we get thanks for the service, whether people agree or not. So thank you for all your service. So I'm born in St. Louis, moved away for a number of years and been back here and then Webster Grove 17 years. So I think the fact I've lived different places provides a bit of a perspective in how things work and don't in other places. I'm an engineer, civil engineer, so I have a good understanding of some of the issues we deal with on Plan Commission, you know, technical issues, things, traffic, flooding, things like that. So I think, you know, that engineer perspective, you know, brings a kind of a critical analysis of some of the things we face. You know, and I've enjoyed serving on the commission. I think, you know, the questions I bring, I think those that have seen me, you know, I think I ask reasonably insightful questions and bring a lot to the dialogue that takes place. You know, if I've been on it, I tried to look up when it's been a while. It's probably been 10, 12 years or so. So, you know, I have that experience in seeing a lot of those things. That could be seen as a downside too, right? I mean, it could be, well, you know, it's just the same old. But I think you need a balance of that. You need some new ideas and you need some experience as well in dealing with things and how things have shaped out over the years. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. But.
Does anyone have a question for Jeff?
All right. Yep. I've either done a good job or a bad job. Okay, so all
Doing a good
right,
job,
thank you,
Jeff.
thank
Doing
you.
a good job, Jeff. Thank you.
And thank you for your service. Okay, appreciate it. All right, I think that's it, isn't it, Katie? That's it for our interviews this evening. So we can go on and say, is there anything on the regular agenda that needs to be discussed? If not, we'll go to the council, city manager issues and meeting updates. And we'll start with Katie. Anything? Sarah? Anything?
Yes, Mayor. I want to make ask Dr. Peoples and our staff to review the fund balance policy that was adopted back in November 2009 to see what adjustments are needed, if any. Also look at the ability to maybe have a fund balance ceiling. So we can say at this point, we know we're good and we can stop reserving. So if you can make that part of the budget process, I think that'll be the perfect time to look at it. That's resolution 2009-44.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Mr. Peterson would be better served to speak to this, but the current fund balance policy is quite a bit higher than what GFOA recommends. So if what I'm understanding you to say, you would like to see a policy brought back that's perhaps more in line with GFOA and has, as I understand, the ceiling rather than,
Yeah. Oh, yes, to see some, bring it back in line with the
Okay.
regulations and see what other items that we can use in that policy to make budgeting a little bit easier.
Thank you.
I would just here answer any questions if you want, or we can just note that and bring it back.
Yeah, just note that and
Okay.
bring it back. Like I said, I think it'll be a perfect part of the budget process, that it can all be adopted with the budget at the same time.
Thank you.
That's all.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, Councilwoman Bliss?
Yes, I have updates from two commissions. First is the Green Space Advisory Commission met last Monday, And we had some updates on the future trees of distinction, which is going to be posted on the website under the new name, at least for now. The effort is going to be called Green Our City. There will be postcards mailed to residents that are nearby identified locations for those trees, but there's also going to be an application online for other residents to apply. And they will be getting ultimately a new free tree. So that will be live soon, and I think we'll hear from Jen when that's ready to go. There was also an update on the trees of distinction, and see Joe was here to talk about it more, but ultimately I'll just, so everyone remembers, the deadline for submissions of those is March 30th. And that's where we, as residents, nominate a tree. Mayor's Monarch Pledge is moving along and Arbor Day is coming up. So I thought I'd just quickly go through what's happening. It seems that Thursdays, the last Thursdays of the month, are becoming good days for educational programs. So in March at the library, there's going to be a native pollinators and tree and shrubs program by a representative from the Botanical Garden. April 28th is Arbor Day, and there's going to be a planting and celebration at Barbary Park. And then Thursday, May 26th will be the launch of the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. And then next on Plan Commission, they met last Monday night as well. And there was a preliminary development plan presented just for discussion on a new a type of residence that has only been zoned once here in Webster. It's called a planned environmental unit. And the whole purpose behind them is to retain open space and green space and protecting the trees, and that the building designs will be harmonious with surrounding neighborhoods. But essentially, they're going to be couplets of attached homes, 6 total on these lots over on Euclid. The meeting went really well. There were some representatives from North Webster there, and they asked a lot of questions. And it was very helpful to have that conversation back and forth. And so that hearing's kept open until April 4th. That's all I have.
Do you know where the other PEU is?
Oh, yes. The other one is on South Elm. It's called Webster Oaks, and it's across catty cornered from Firehouse 2. And that was built in the 80s. And that was the first instance of that. Were you here when that came up?
No, but I just remember that.
Okay.
That is a
Actually, the
PEU.
80s, yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a very attractive unit. I don't know if you've ever walked around in there, but it is a very nice little neighborhood.
Yeah, it is. Good. All right, thank you.
I
Barb?
have very little tonight. The one thing I would like for us to do is congratulate the Webster Groves High School, both the girls and boys basketball teams for the first time in their history are going to the Final Four.
I
at the same
know.
time.
It's so cool.
So Friday are the semifinals and Saturday are the finals, and it is streaming live. So be sure to tune in.
Can you help us out, figure out how we get that streaming live going?
I will send you. an
Will
email
you?
with all the details.
Thank you.
did it last year. I can help you too.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. I
Here
really
do
would.
it from New York. Yeah,
I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Cool. Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
I have nothing, Mayor.
Marie?
Yes, ma'am. I've got a few things. Councilwoman Arnold announced the first one though, but oh no, it's great. The more recognition we can give. So city staff are invited to wear their statesmen and stateswomen gear or colors on Friday. And we've arranged to have Public Works and the clerk put a congratulations or a support way to go on our placard outside on Friday as well. But it's super neat. So we're proud of them for that. We started our budget meetings this week with departments. They've went really well. Of course, these are just the preliminary budget meetings, but really digging into information. As you all know, this will be a very big budget year with a lot of discussions. Really want to thank all the department directors and their staff for the hard work that they've put into this as well. Along the budget news, we do have some good news. The state notified the city on Friday, I believe, that we would be receiving an additional $22,000 in ARP funds. Those funds come from other municipalities that did not accept the funds. So we're pleased to be able to get that $22,000. And it will be deposited rather quickly. It will be in our account next week. Good. So that was good news. That brings our total award up to date to around 2.3 million that we've received. So And then last week, myself, Councilpersons Bliss, Smith, and Richardson attended the Alliance for Interracial Dignities event that highlighted the city's DEI work. Carter Hicks presented the summary findings and hosted a discussion on it. And then there was some small group discussion as well. And so I believe the next steps is that the Alliance is going to summarize those discussions and forward them perhaps along with some recommendations that came out of those table talk chats. So as soon as we receive that, we will share that as well. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, and I have actually nothing to share. So unusual. So let's go on to our topics. And our first topic is the Tree of Distinction. And I think Joe is here to talk about that. Tell us a little bit more about that program. So this is Joe. How do
Yep.
I say that right?
It's
Elke.
Olkey.
Olkey,
Yep.
not Elke.
So good evening. My name is Joe Olkey. I'm one of the certified arborists with the Webster Groves Green Space Advisory Commission. I'm excited to be here this evening to talk to you about the Trees Distinction Program. Some of you may already know this program, others may not. So this is more of just a kind of a refresher. So when people think of Webster Groves, they tend to think of old historic neighborhoods filled with large mature trees that provide significant amounts of shade and amazing fall colors. But a lot of people do not take into consideration the other benefits these trees provide. For instance, they increase property values, mitigate storm water runoff, and lower utility bills. The Trees of Distinction Program was established in 2006 to raise public awareness for the importance of trees to the city's rich history and heritage, culture, and beauty. Can we get the next slide? The program documents and compiles a record of the significant trees located within the city, both public and private. These trees may be known for their large size, unique species, or maybe they're located on historic property. Next slide, please. For example, this large American elm, which can be found about a block and a half away from Blackburn Park, is still standing and thriving today. Next slide. Oh, and there's supposed to be a photo that Yvonne has sent, but oh, there you go. So currently, the program relies on residents to submit nominations. The idea is to encourage the community to be on the lookout for the next unique tree that can be honored. Every year, the nominations are submitted to the commission where we judge each one individually. Once selected, the property owners of the Trees Distinction Award will receive recognition from the city during Arbor Day festivities, including a commemorative plaque like shown above. The Webster Groves Green Space Advisory Commission is hopeful that residents will partner with the Parks Department in an effort to protect, preserve, and maintain the urban forest in the Webster Groves. And that's all I have. And like Pam said, that March 30th is the deadline to submit trees. So anybody have any questions? This is kind of like just a refresher. So
The link is on the city website.
yeah, it should be. Yeah. So great. Thank you.
Anything? Joe, thank you. This has been a great program to go around town and just kind of see some of these spectacular specimens that are here. But I think we lost one last year, didn't we? Yeah.
Mayor, is that trees or is it only trees on public property or
No.
private?
So residents. So majority of the times is residents that were submitting the trees for distinction, but there have been trees like Mayor Welch was saying that fell down that was at Eden Seminary, or is it over on Lockwood? There was a tree that fell down last year that was a tree of distinction. So it's
And they
public
have to
and
be,
private.
they have to be visible from the street.
In the past, we've had trees that were nominated, but you couldn't see the actual tree from the street. So it's kind of, we didn't really honor those. So
It's kind of off subject, but Mayor, that magnolia tree we want to look at.
Yes.
Did that come down or?
Yes, it did come down. It
Yep.
did come down.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Yep. All right. Thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate your work. All right. Our next item is our sustainability plan, which for those of us who had a copy of it, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty spectacular here and very comprehensive. And so Jamie Hassemeyer is here to talk about it.
Hi. This little mouse will work. Sure thing. My bad. Okay, right on. Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Dr. Peoples. My name is Jamie Hassemeyer, and I'm the chair of the Sustainability Commission. I'm honored to be here tonight with you to present the Sustainability Plan Forever Webster Groves. I'd like to take a moment to introduce to you the members of this commission, and I'm going to make them feel uncomfortable and ask them to stand up and say their names.
John Berenson.
And those are some of our members. Jeff Tomich is our vice chair. Amna Anwar, Patrick McGrath, Jeff Mazer, Michael Staus, and Carla Armbruster are also part of the commission. This is a group of dedicated citizens who are passionate about creating a sustainable Webster and focused on solutions to get us there. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to work with them, to get to know them, and to present this plan to you on their behalf. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize our staff liaison, Todd Ray, and our council liaison, Laura Arnold, both who have been incredibly willing and helpful partners during this process. We are very grateful. Okay, let's see. Ooh, it worked. If you've been paying attention to current climate news, you'll know that on February 28th, the IPCC, an apolitical body of climate experts convened by the United Nations, delivered its most devastating report. In a New York Times piece about the report, climate journalist Raymond Zong and Brad Plumer write, it concludes that nations aren't doing nearly enough to protect cities, farms, and coastlines. I just lost my spot. Sorry, from the hazards that climate change has unleashed so far, such as record droughts and rising seas, let alone from the even greater disasters in store as the planet continues to warm. You'd be forgiven if you had missed it, because other world events had already caught your attention, as a few days prior to the release of that report, Russia invaded Ukraine. What these two things have in common is the root cause of the destruction, burning fossil fuels. In a piece written by Bill McKibben in The Guardian after the invasion, he wrote that this is a war underwritten by oil and gas, a war whose most crucial weapon may be oil and gas, and a war we can't fully engage because we remain dependent on oil and gas. You might be wondering how Webster fits into these world events. If we zoom out, we can find our connection to what is happening on the world stage, and that reducing our reliance on fossil fuels gives us the power to create a cleaner and brighter future for Webster and for the world. That's why we're here tonight. If we decide to lead in our region on bold sustainability efforts, our actions have the potential to encourage other municipalities in our region to address their policies that implement climate mitigation strategies. What started as a moment will turn into a movement. About a year ago, our commission rejoined the Green Cities Challenge offered by Earthways Center of Missouri Botanical Gardens. That's where we were introduced to the idea of creating a sustainability plan for our city to use as a guide. After we were granted permission to proceed from this council, we set a path of engagement. We surveyed our residents, the business community, and city staff because we thought it was important to hear what types of sustainability efforts were already being practiced and where we could find room to improve. We hosted an open house to allow access to the process and further engagement. We met with you to hear your concerns and with other key stakeholders in the city. The subcommittee met multiple times to develop the text of the plan to be sure it had a distinct Webster focus. We have spent hours creating and editing, and at the beginning of this month, the commission held a special meeting where the plan was adopted unanimously. We then handed it over to the able hands of Ms Starkey to do her magic, and what you have in your packet is a work of love and determination. This is our vision statement. The members of the Sustainability Commission, like you, love Webster Groves. We share rich traditions, strong schools, and a solid foundation of community. We value our past, and we have the opportunity to invest in our future. We are in a climate emergency, and we have the responsibility to our neighbors of today and tomorrow to respond accordingly. The plan is divided into 4 areas of focus. Tonight, I'd ask that you imagine with us the potential of each focus should you decide to adopt forever Webster Groves. Webster Groves is a mature, thriving community that charms residents and visitors alike. Our dependence on cars and trucks comes at a cost to the environment, however, both locally and beyond. Traffic, smog, public safety, and climate change. The transportation sector is the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in the US. Reducing CO2 emissions also means fewer emissions of other air pollutants and improved public health locally. Webster is one of a few walkable neighborhoods in the St. Louis region. We have so much community to offer within mere blocks. Imagine supporting people-centered places by walking and cycling made safer and easier. And we're working on that right now. In cooperation with Todd and the Public Works Department, the commission created a walkable, bikeable subcommittee to revisit the 2014 TrailNet plan. They have identified a north-south and east-west corridor through Webster that will be marked with either bike lanes or sharrows accompanied by street signs to make for safer cycling through our community this spring. To celebrate, we created another subcommittee to work with Webster on Wheels group to highlight the newly painted lanes and to let citizens know we are listening to them. We would like to thank the city for their partnership for this fun community event. Imagine safe walking and biking routes for our kids to get safely to school. Pulling folks out of cars and onto their feet is a goal that is both healthy for people and planet. It will help us reduce carbon emissions while providing physical health benefits. Imagine a campaign to help motorists and cyclists understand how to coexist and reduce pedestrian injuries. Imagine turning the city fleet over to a hybrid or electric vehicles, which is happening right now. Currently, our Public Works Department is working with Ameren to do a fleet audit and to right-size our fleet and electrify it. Imagine installing EV charging stations in our city lots. Webster is an ideal charging community, being so close to Highway 44. We have multiple business districts for travelers to dine and shop while charging. Imagine adjusting our codes to help homeowners make the electric transition. These are just a few of the multiple ways we can work toward reducing our vehicle carbon emissions. Boasting beautiful homes, synergistic educational institutions, destination business districts, and civic structures like our historic City Hall, Webster Groves has a robust and diverse collection of buildings. The energy and resources used to support these buildings and civil infrastructure contributes large amounts of greenhouse gas to the atmosphere, though. Investments in clean energy have the double bottom line of benefiting health and budget. Imagine making investments in our buildings that pay for themselves in a few years. Utilizing available tools to set benchmarks to measure our efforts, conducting energy lighting audits and implementing energy savings programs, creating a culture of waste reduction, energy reduction, and thoughtful stewardship of resources. Imagine assisting homeowners, schools, nonprofits, and businesses in their quest to reduce their carbon footprint. Promoting energy efficient projects and practices that prioritize green building code improvements and retrofits. Creating incentive programs to assist homeowners along the path of sustainable living with a basic plan including, but not limited to, solar installation, green roofs, rain gardens, and energy audits. Imagine saving money after changing all the street lamps to LEDs and adding shields to direct the light toward the ground. That also benefits wildlife. Imagine enhancing our Grow Solar partnership with our regional efforts. Opportunities to support smart growth exist on every Webster block. Tree-lined streets, parks, greenways, and our own yards are gathering places for a thriving community and a thriving ecosystem. Webster has a healthy balance of parks and tree canopy to host wildlife and bring joy and comfort to our lives. Imagine collaborations with the Green Space Alliance Commission to help the city bring stakeholders to the table to examine the potential of the Shady Creek area to bring our community together. Imagine working with planning and development to examine existing and potential codes to assist home and business owners in mitigating floods during large rain events. But we also have a program called the Stormwater Runoff Best Management Practices Microgrant for homeowners. Imagine collaborating with Webster Grove school districts to harness the power of youth to engage best practices with their grownups by encouraging no idling practices at the schools, walking and cycling more safely, and reducing waste. The Future Trees of Distinction program is exactly the long view thinking that we need to employ. We can encourage ecological health of our green space and harmonize with Earth's systems to address water quality and conservation and to improve stormwater flooding events. Webster Groves offers a strong sense of community that is unique and ever evolving. The community enjoys the stability of generations, but is also open and welcoming to new residents. Creating a common set of goals and an appreciation for shared experiences will bring neighbors even closer together and reinforce the pride in our city's character. Imagine the city being a reliable sustainability resource for residents, providing educational programming in collaboration with Parks and Rec, uplifting the speaker series the GSAC offered in the before times, having regular waste diversion efforts such as the pumpkin smash, the Christmas light recycling, and increasing frequency of the electronics recycling drop-offs, supporting our residents in their backyard composting efforts, but also encouraging better food waste management through micro haulers for neighbors who might not have time for a backyard project. Imagine a community where environmental equity is a priority. Webster has many unique neighborhoods. How can we engage each neighborhood to identify their unique needs, from sidewalks to crosswalks to seeking funding for renewables? Imagine a Webster that works to walk the talk as a city, that reduces waste at city-sponsored events, eliminates plastic bottles and styrofoam, that composts at city buildings. These focus areas highlight multiple ideas and strategies to make Webster a healthier and more sustainable community. To accomplish this effort, the Commission has highlighted 9 recommendations to consider. How we prioritize them will be the next conversation should the plan be adopted. Our recommendations are: create a director of sustainability, benchmark all city-owned facilities, foster strong working relationships within the city to realize goals, communicate with residents why these actions are critical, collaborate with regional sustainability efforts, identify outside funding at the regional, state, and federal levels. There are so many funding opportunities that are out there, and I've been in conversation with the county and SWMD over the last couple of weeks to find out what they have available, and SWMD funds positions. So there's really a plethora of programs out there that we can look at. Review the plan semi-annually. Review the plan semi-annually with the Commission to ensure goals are on track. Determine the priority level and schedule with key stakeholders, and add a statement of sustainability to the Webster Groves mission. The goals in this plan range from common sense to ambitious. The members of the Sustainability Commission believe that our city is capable of addressing each focus area with a pragmatic and collaborative spirit. This plan can set into motion a vision for our community that centers people and celebrates what we have in common. We have so much to gain if we work together for a clean, thriving, and beautiful Webster Groves. We ask that you consider Forever Webster Groves. We hope this presentation is the beginning of a fruitful conversation, and we will be eager to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on a
Before you
really
go,
comprehensive plan.
another member of the commission came in case Jamie wants to introduce him as well.
So stand up and introduce yourself, sir.
Yes, you have
It
to
has to be
stand
fair.
up.
It's all
Jeff.
good. Thanks, Jeff.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I already embarrassed everyone else, so equal treatment.
Well, congratulations on a really
Thanks.
thoughtful, deep, intensive plan. Good work, good work. So let's see who has a question.
I want to make sure I understood. So the next time we meet, you will have some type of priority of how you want to
Well, I don't really know the process from here on out. If that is our next step, naturally, we could, the commission could meet with you all and decide what those priorities could look like. We kind of threw everything that we
Yeah.
could think of into the plan. And we know that we want this to be a living document because as science changes constantly and availability of funds changes constantly. And so we want to be able to be flexible to what's available. That said, we put a lot into the plan. And so there's, like I said, there's some really what they call low hanging fruit that is almost no cost and will, recoup the expense to invest.
And your implementation date you like to start? I mean,
Uh,
like the fall or right away? next
Tomorrow?
week?
But let's remember that the commission doesn't get to implement any of this, right? I mean, that's staff and us who do the implementation.
Right.
And so my understanding is what the commission is really asking us is to review closely the plan, adopt it as sort of an aspirational statement that we can work to over time. And then part of their job would be to help us figure out prioritize what is the low hanging fruit, what is the stuff that we have to really plan for over the long term. I think we got to be careful by saying to the Sustainability Commission, now it's your job to implement this plan, because number one, they don't have the authority. And number two, I think this is the best evidence I've seen of us leveraging the expertise in our community for something that's really, really great. Watching this group of people work on this over the last, they might say 6 months, but it's been percolating for longer than that. And the degree to which the entire commission has been committed and spent hours and hours and hours, and they've thought through how hard it's going to be, and they've thought through the financial constraints that we have. And so, I also don't want to say to them, you put all this work into it, now you go make it happen, because it just can't happen that way.
Oh, no, my comment was meant to, if they have any, like the low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
since we were right in the midst of the
Mhm.
budget,
Yeah.
you need to put resources behind plans like this to make it work. You don't put the resources behind it, just a pipe dream. So that's why I was asking if you had
Yeah.
anything that you wanted to tackle this year, be best for us to look at and see what we put in the budget and
Well-
then tackle it.
I was gonna say, who's your staff liaison?
Tom,
Oh, Tom. Wouldn't it make sense for like budget concerns and anything that's potential to go through the staff liaison, and the staff liaison then can discuss it with the commission, and then that is brought forward to us?
I agree.
Because the staff's the one that's gonna actually have to implement it, so might as well get the staff on board, ensure that there is a budget to do the stuff that is proposed to us, and then bring it forward to us.
Yeah, and now's the time because we're right in the midst of budget preparation.
But I think first of all, we as a council, or not maybe sitting tonight, over time, have to actually adopt the mission statement and the overall framework that they've put together. Otherwise, we're not going to work underneath the plan. We're doing things piecemeal. And I don't think that's the intent at all. The intent is to do this in a comprehensive way going forward. And I'm not suggesting we should adopt it tonight, because I think it's complicated. And personally, they did public engagement through a survey. They did public engagement through the open house. I'd also though like to give the public some time, now that it is a finished document, to comment on the finished document. What things maybe does our public want to add, or are they concerned about that we need to better explain or consider in a different way? I think it would make sense to have some amount of time for that to happen, even though I know this is an urgent priority and I don't want to kick the can down the road. I just think it's important now that we have concrete language for us to really, if we're going to commit to this, let's really commit to it with full engagement of our community.
Emerson, if I might, our commission is filled with incredibly smart, talented, and eager people. We have loads of ideas that we want to see put forth, from the low hanging fruit to the ambitious, in this plan. What we thought would be important is to have the support of the city council and our mayor in order to feel like we were stepping out on firm footing for some of these ideas. There are loads of ideas we have in the queue, in ranging. from low investment, of course, to high. We're very respectful of the fact that you all are in a strategic planning process, a budget process, and an election. So we want to be respectful of the timing there.
It was a well-written document. I read it. And like I said, I'd like to see it move forward. If this next step is having the council adopt your vision and mission, let's get that done. Let's do that. And then we'll move on to the next stage.
I think this can be multi-pronged rather than, just sitting and waiting for one thing or another to happen. And, tonight you have a council that heard this report and, we can ask for support from this council in moving forward, which would be one prong. A second prong would be with the budget process coming up. Maybe there is some low-hanging, less cost things that you and the staff liaison, Mr. Egg, can talk about that could be considered in this, so that we don't just sit back and wait for everything, but we start to move this along in a couple of steps here. And so I would ask if the city council would give support to this plan, at least for what we've heard tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to see like a public town hall to celebrate it, not necessarily to pick it apart, but to actually present it to the public and say, say that we've signed on to this. Like, I think instead of having kind of a feedback session, I mean, certainly we could have some Q&A, but I think it would be nice to go into an event and say, this is the plan I put together. This is what we've adopted.
I also see the council adopting this as one of their strategic plans that we, support on our strategic sheet.
It seems in addition to the budget, we would just timeline, what could happen in the near future, what requires long range planning and stuff. So maybe those could be coupled in a next step for everybody to review and or, celebrate together. So
Yes, Mr. Reg wants to come up and speak. Come on, Todd.
Some of the low hanging fruit that we are implementing right now. Jamie mentioned we're doing bike lanes on Lockwood.
That's
We're gonna
not
do-
low hanging fruit. That's a
Doing
big
Sharrows
deal.
down Lockwood. We're doing Sharrows on Bompart and on Edgar. That's our north-south. We have 2 recycling grants out right now. We have a composting grant, which those compost bins should be available here later this spring. And then we are in process of getting recycling bins for our business districts to set next to the trash cans in the business districts. So we got the low hanging fruit we're picking.
also parks, right? Our
Parks
recycling-
has some recycling
Okay.
containers already, yeah.
Mr. Ray,
Yes.
could you give a real brief update on the e-fleets and vehicle
and so-
reassessment?
So that's the other one, another low hanging fruit. Ameren has a program for municipalities to electrify their fleets. So I've given them all of our data on our gasoline usage and our mileage and everything. So they have put together a report. They are finalizing that report. And then our next steps would be to look at installing the charging stations here at City Hall and at the service center. And then also having a public charging station at the City Hall parking lot. And then purchasing those vehicles. We have 2 passenger vehicles that are up for replacement for the building department next year. And those are 2 of the 8 vehicles that Ameren is looking at electrifying. So
Great.
Keep
So
moving it forward.
there's a lot going on now. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So you heard from all of the council members this evening that we are in support of this. And we've heard that you have some things going forward. Now I think with a new council, you'll figure out what the next steps will be after that.
Right.
Mayor, is there, do we do any kind of resolution for this or just to say our support? Just
Well, I
to
think
make it
right now,
firm?
tonight, we.
No, not tonight, but I'm just saying going forward to say, we adopt this process and support it.
You can, and
Can.
again, it can be done by simply acclamation. It can be done by resolution. It's probably better to do it by resolution once you've had a chance to digest it.
Thank you.
And there may be some things that ultimately would become an ordinance depending. So but a resolution would be a good approach.
Very good. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Mayor, if I can, and congratulations to you and everybody that I know has worked for a very long time on this. It's a
you.
beautiful document, and
Thank
more
you.
important than being beautiful, it is chock full of great recommendations that the city should be engaged in and that we are actively doing. And so there are a lot of things, and I would agree with you, Mayor, they're not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but there's a lot of things that we're already doing and well positioned to do more of. But I do want to call your attention to one of the recommendations that does have a fiscal impact that does need to have consideration as we move forward with the budget. And that is the recommendation to have an Office of Sustainability along with a Director of Sustainability. So certainly not conversation for tonight, but as we talk about the budget and where we really go with our strategic planning, what is the city's mission, vision, values as we move forward? I would also say the same is true of DEI as we talk about these things. Two separate topics, but there's also a lot of overlap. We're talking about where we're going into the future, and there's a lot of overlap in between social justice, environmental justice. And so I just throw that out there that as we talk about budgets, is this something that we support with a director, and certainly not asking for answers now? And I think there's other options there. Are we talking about somebody that works in policy and perhaps still a high level position, but perhaps that focuses on policy analyst and policy writing? There's a lot of considerations, and myself and other staff are happy to do some of that legwork as we hear from you in the coming weeks about what you might be interested in. So just want to throw that out there, that there are some dollars and cents behind this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thank you. Come on up, Karen. Great. Good job. Good job. So. All right. With that, we're going to move on to our next item tonight, which is the accessory dwelling units. And Mara is going to talk about those, what they are, and some ideas.
So good evening. I wanted to remind you all sort of what the planning department usually does each year. A couple times a year, we come to you with some thoughts and ideas that we have for some code changes we might be looking at. When I first came to this position, I looked at our zoning code, which was primarily from 1956, and said, why are we not just hiring someone to completely redo it? And in that first year, as I was using the code, I started realizing it was very unique. And if someone from the outside came in and just made a change, they would probably change things potentially for the worse, because they don't understand our community and how it works, and how some of our very odd code sections really create the kind of eclectic blocks, architecture, and other things that we have. So in that manner, we continued in the last, this summer, I'll have been here 10 years. And we have been each year doing probably 2 or 3 code amendments, taking different small sections one at a time, making sure that we address and look at all the potential implications. So if we make that code change, what does it mean? Does it mean we have more people asking for variances? Are we making things non-conformities? Are we taking care of stormwater? Are we making it worse? Are we making it better? Are we protecting trees? So all of those different sections come one after the other. We know that in the last year, there were some potential code changes that moved forward, and then some potential code changes that did not. We wanted to bring forward a new option of a code change based on some of the things that have been discussed in the last year or so. I will let you know, so it used to be when I used to be able to travel more for conferences and things like that, when conferences weren't just virtual and we were in person. I went to both the national conference in New York and the national conference in San Francisco, and I presented at both those conferences, but I also took in a lot of sessions, and those sessions helped us with our home, our like Airbnb short-term rental ordinance. Those sessions also helped with our medical marijuana ordinance. And I took in a lot of sessions about accessory dwelling units, but at the time, it was something that was, it's San Francisco, it's New York, it's Seattle, it's not us necessarily, but I think that there are still things to be learned, especially over the last couple of years as things have changed since I last learned more about them. So what I wanted to present to you this evening was a little bit more about these accessory dwelling units. And sorry, I keep losing my mouse. There we go. And I wanted to talk about what's in our code, because we do have the ability to have accessory dwelling units, but they're very limited. So right now in our code, it has in all 4 of our zoning districts that you can't have an accessory building without having a primary building. So you can't put a garage on a lot if there's not a house on the lot. So you can't just put something, and we've had a couple people say, well, can't I just put, but there's no house there. So it has that in the code. It also has in the code, no garage or carport attached or detached can be converted to habitable or dwelling space unless it can be demonstrated that they have the one off-street parking space per the code. We have a lot of people who do this. They find just a pad where they can put their car, totally works, keep still that one off-street, because we do have a very tight infrastructure in Webster Groves, and we love our cars. For all that there are ride sharing and all these other things, one of the things we get complaints about the most is, the number of cars and the number of kids driving to the high school that all have their own cars, and the number of families that have multiple drivers and 3 and 4 cars per lot. So that is still in there. And even in some of the other codes I looked at, many of them still kept that in their codes, but didn't require additional parking for that unit. So they still said, hey, you still need to keep it for the primary, but you don't have to require more for a secondary. It also has in our code, which is really old language that we've never touched, that if you do make living accommodations in that accessory structure, it is only for members of the family as a single housekeeping unit. So they're on that occupancy permit. So a mother, a father, a child, an uncle, someone else living with you, or it still has employed for domestic services. Again, still from our 1956 zoning code. It continues on about making sure that you have the occupancy, but that has been used for a number of people, creating a mother-in-law unit, a father-in-law unit, or some other unit that they want their child who's come back from college who doesn't have a place to stay to be able to stay. It then continues and has that no accessory building or structure can be used for a rental property. And the way that the code has actually done it in 2 ways is not only does it say you can't use it as a rental property, but it also says you can't have metered utility services that are separate. Now, the separate metered utility services makes it easier for someone to lease a space and have a separate utility that they pay directly. We have recently, which kind of dovetails with the last presentation, had the conversation that sometimes the separate meter is needed for people wanting to put in an electric service for their electric vehicle. So we had started already discussing that we wanted to change that code section, but we hadn't really delved into, does that code section then lead to it being able to be leased out separately? So I wanted to show you a little bit. I put in your packets a number of articles. Some of the articles were more about just general zoning changes, which we've discussed before, which is that many communities are just completely going away from single family zoning and just changing completely to you can have single, 2, 3 units, 4 units, and they are just removing it completely. Again, most of those are East Coast, West Coast, larger communities. So in taking this and looking at a section that could still address some of these other elements, is the opportunity to allow accessory dwelling units. So the one I wanted to give a little bit more information on, besides the articles that were in there, is the one about Seattle. So Seattle has taken it to an even bigger level. They have gotten to the point where you can actually zoom into their GIS map, you can click on your lot, and you can see what kind of a dwelling unit can you have, what are the restrictions that you need to have, does that property next to you already have one that's already approved. It even has a pretty amazing website with pre-approved plans. So there's a set of plans that you can actually go and say, oh, I already know that I can do 400 square feet on my lot. Here's the designer I can contact to get a pre-approved plan that's already been reviewed by Architecture Review Board, and I can put this small structure onto the property. They also talked a little bit about, which was quite fascinating. So again, this is like you can have a smaller unit in the rear, a primary unit towards the front, but they actually went even into more detail, and this is a little hard to see, but on their website, they actually said you could have 2 accessory dwelling units. You could have one that might be in a basement or attached to your house, and you could have a second one in an accessory unit. That's pretty intense. That's a lot of it. But again, Seattle is an area that land is it's all packed. There, the cost of living is so extremely high, makes it very difficult. Same thing with San Francisco. But the thing that's pretty fascinating about it is that they've done even more details. They've said, here's what your setbacks are. We already do have setbacks in our code for our accessory structures. We have some limitations in the size of our accessory structures. We have a lot of this already in the code that could continue to work with this idea. And then the building code has some minimum requirements of how much you need for just essentially a tiny home, a small dwelling unit. And in following that and working with that, there are opportunities to look at this as a potential of something to look in our codes. So I just wanted to bring that forward with the articles, bring it before all of you to say, you know, do we want to continue and do further research in other cities, see that how they've done the ADUs, and then looking to see if we can find ones in smaller density areas, because again, the articles really do focus on some of the larger communities, but even entire states. Vermont has adopted an ADU ordinance, and then some of the other cities, so California, Vermont, Oregon, and Washington have adopted them, and then Seattle, and then Montgomery County, Maryland. I was gonna look that one up. It's a little close to where some of my family lives, so I was gonna check out and see what their ordinances were, because they are more of a spread out suburb of the DC area. And so it would be another opportunity to look at.
I think this sounds like a great idea. I really do. I think that talk about an opportunity to create potentially more affordability within Webster Groves. I think this is an option to do so. And also to allow citizens that want to age in place, opportunity to downsize. I know I probably hammered on this more than anyone, but the parking. I never understood why we need another parking space when you do an ADU. Like, what is the inconvenience to the residents to have a car parked on the street? I know it's an annoyance maybe, but what's the inconvenience? What's the thing that's making their life worse? If anything, in order to require another parking unit, it's actually making their life, it's making it more difficult to do affordability or to create alternative housing in Webster Groves.
I think the hard part is some of our right-of-way widths. There are many streets that can barely get, once you have a driveway for every single lot, and if a lot is only 50 feet wide and has a driveway, you might only get one parking space in front. And for some of these houses with 3 and 4, some of them are very difficult to get fire trucks through. So it's just a combination of things. Again, I wish I could say that we are all going to these electric vehicles, but I look at some of these blocks, because of where all the driveways are, and even the requests now that people want circle driveways because they don't have enough parking spaces. Once you add all those curb cuts in, it leaves the ability to actually put a parking space in front of someone's house down to almost none. And in some areas, those driveways are so close together, there's not enough space between driveways, but there are awkward spaces because our code doesn't specifically say, well, if you have your driveway here and the neighbor says, well, I want to slide it over a little bit more, and now you have a space that's only 10 feet between them, you can't put one car there. So now you've lost a 10-foot car space, the 10-foot for each of the driveways. There's 30 feet when you could have maybe clustered them together and gotten a parking space in. If there was a way to integrate that, I wish. I would love if I only had one vehicle and had great public transportation. Most of us don't. We just don't have the bus routes through here anymore. We definitely don't have, access to Metro Link.
But what's the issue we're trying to solve? But too many cars parked on the street?
It's not too many cars. There aren't spaces for people to park.
So they have to walk after they park to go to their residence? I mean, that's the thing that I'm trying to get at. You know what I mean? What's the harm? That's what
I agree with you. There is no harm.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
So if there's no harm, then why solve the problem? There's no problem to solve. That's what I guess I'm trying to
Not
get
if you're
at.
answering Mara's phone. If you're answering Mara's phone, there's a problem.
Yeah. But see, this is what talk about reimagining the way that we think about suburbs. This is an opportunity to do so.
Sure.
especially if we want to create more affordability or alternative housing in Webster Groves. This is going to be one of those concessions that residents are going to have to agree to if we're going to go down this path, I think, because in order to build more parking spots, you're going to have more concrete, which then decreases the environmental friendliness of this. And it also, I mean, it also encourages people to have more cars then. If you're limiting the availability of parking, then hopefully that encourages the idea of either going to MoDOT or whoever in order to create opportunities for alternative transportation.
And again, I would love it. The number of variances that I get because people can't get a 2-car or 3-car garage on their lot. I mean, that's the hours we spend every week. So again, I wish I would love to encourage that. And again, Seattle had said, if you make your garage into it, you just have that one parking space. It doesn't add an additional for the second dwelling unit, which is an interesting one that I haven't seen before.
Yeah. So are there limits on the size of ADUs usually, like on the structure itself?
In Seattle's code, they had, based on your lot size, a certain square footage, similar to what we already have for our accessory dwelling units.
You know, I remember talking to residents that have lived here for a long time, and they explained to me, like back in the day with Webster University, there'd be a lot of Webster University students that would somehow above the garage or an alternate, like, you know, rent out a room and everything, kind of like the precursor to Airbnb and everything like that. And so it seems like this is not new to Webster Groves. The historical precedent for us is there already. That in order, we're just modernizing the way that people live now.
Can I change the subject slightly
Yes,
and
please.
ask an additional question? We know that the city owns and that we have a significant number of what we would call non-buildable lots right now because they're too small. Is this an opportunity to figure out if those can be made buildable if we set the parameters for the size of the unit small enough so it actually fits into it?
Thank you,
The-
Laura, because that's
We have-
exactly,
we-
what can we do about tiny homes on tiny
Well,
lots?
we could do tiny homes are allowed. They've always been allowed, but the lots that we have, they're not even lots. They're slivers. They wouldn't even fit like a 70 square foot bedroom. Like those, if they could.
Are they
work-
really all that way? I mean, you and I have gone through with those students over the Community Land Trust and they seem
Yeah.
to find some that they think are big enough. So
There's a pair of, there's one set of 2,
yeah,
and that's probably the only one
okay,
that we have, which you and I had talked with Habitat for Humanity about.
exactly.
The only other ones, they're usually like a sliver that someone doesn't want to pay taxes on, that like is sloped or is,
Okay.
is a triangle or is all of them
So
are,
optimistically, that would be a very, very, very small number of those.
that'd be a small number of those.
Okay.
Except, what if we could put 2 or 3 tiny homes on one lot, one buildable lot? I mean,
Right. So if
rather
we put
than
those
a
two,
sliver.
those two that we've
Oh,
talked about
if-
and
or-
put more than one.
Or you
yeah.
have another lot somewhere that is a decent sized lot. What's the possibility of putting 2 tiny homes on it?
Well, that's what this would do. You could have,
So we could do 2 tiny homes. It's not necessarily that it's an accessory
However,
structure.
practically speaking,
the-
everybody puts a big house as big as possible on their lots, not 2 little ones.
so a primary home, people call me all the time and say, well, can I have a tiny home? And I'm like, there's nothing that says you have to build a big house. I mean, I've had a couple people who are swearing up and down that a developer next door has said that this is the house size that Webster makes them build. And I said, no, it's not. So yes, you could have a primary home that has a small footprint. And then they could have a second one that has a small footprint. It's just the question of, right now, our code relates them to one another.
Right.
Our code says if you have 1,000 square foot house, you can have a 400 plus just right out square, you get 40% of the square footage of your existing house. Bless you. So there could be this combination of, we change that relationship, that you could do it in that way.
Well, you have to change the relationship you have to change the required relationship between the people who live in those 2 units.
That too, yes. So these are all the code sections that we would probably need to look at closely. And then looking at, I'd want to look at how some of these others that have been permitting them for a number of years, what are the things that have been important to them? So looking at Seattle's site, they had a floor area ratio. They had a set of setbacks, just like we do. They had a relationship of how many you could have based on the size of the lot. And so each of those created, there were still minimum lot sizes. So if you had a tiny lot, you couldn't necessarily have an accessory dwelling unit
right.
on that tiny lot.
Well, because that goes to what I would imagine to be probably the first problem that people would identify, which is, with the variability in rainfall and the stormwater issues we already have, you've got to be subject to some regulation so that we have a place for the stormwater to go.
Roofs.
Well, that would be good too.
And we encourage those.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially on accessory dwelling units, because you really are taking away a lot of the potential, or you're creating more potential for water runoff. And I mean, that's what's going on in Kirkwood. And Kirkwood is full of water runoff.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, short of figuring out which criteria and regulations we would want to put on this, I think it's worth continuing to look at more.
And with the sustainability discussion, it's a great day to have this conversation too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Besides accessory dwelling units, is there a potential to do accessory commercial units?
That's a bigger step. I mean, right now it would be a change. So we have updated the home occupation code, which you all did in the last couple of years. It was put in there that they already can have it in the accessory structure. It just has the same home occupation regulations as it has had before. So, I mean, people can have it in their accessory structure already.
I just wonder, especially now as we come out of hopefully coming out of post-COVID world, it's the business structure is likely to change even more dramatically in the next 5-10 years, and more people will be operating out of their home. And so I just question, might be a good way, or I just wonder if this would be a good way to forward think and think about where the future is going.
And the home occupation ordinance already allows it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we
It's-
solved that
we've been
problem
there.
a couple years ago when we worked on home occupation.
Yeah, and then we've been really clear with people, if they are working from home, they don't need a home occupation business license. There are many people now that have, a brick and mortar location somewhere in the world, and then they're just operating, out of their home, and so there's nothing needed for that.
Excellent.
All right. Anything else? Anyone else have a question? Mara, it sounds like we're happy to have you continue along with on the path of ADUs. So thank you.
And Mara, we should, because of, I think the A1, the A4 zoning, your idea here is that it would apply to as many swaths of Webster Groves as possible, at least initially, and then based off a lot size. We're not going to limit this to just A4.
You are correct. It's already the exact same language that I put up on the screen is in all 4 of our zoning districts. So every single residential zoning district, it would apply to all of them.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mara.
Thanks,
All
Mara.
right. Thank you very much, Mara. Appreciate your work on this. And finally, we go to our update on the use tax with Ms. Starkey.
Okay, Eric's pulling up my presentation, but I just wanted to give a little bit of an update about what we've done about Prop U and what is coming so far. And then show a little video that was done that can be used on social media to help raise awareness.
Good.
So here we go. Okay, so just to talk, and I've got it. So when looking at prop, where's my, use this. Can I not, oh wait, do I see this? I'm not used to this. I don't present as much. Okay, I'm there. I'm good. Okay, yay. So on the ballot, we do have a sample ballot that's located on our website, but I'm just highlighting Prop C for St. Louis County and Prop U for Webster Groves. So those will both be on the ballot. And of course, they're very similar. One is for the St. Louis County and one is for Webster Groves. We can get money from both, but what we're doing throughout the city of Webster Groves is to promote Prop U more than anything else, just to make people aware of that 1.5% use tax that can come through here in Webster Groves. I do have this chart on our.
But I want to stop you and tell you that Prop C is incredibly important to us.
Yes.
Incredibly important to us.
It could be.
Yeah, we'll get a lot of money. And they've been doing a lot of promotions from that. And I do have some information on it on our website, just kind of where it ties through. Like
Oh,
this
it's-
chart right here shows that when you make something with a local purchase, you get sales tax from state of Missouri, St. Louis County, and Webster Groves. And then when you make online purchases, the state of Missouri is moving forward. St. Louis County and Webster Groves are not right now. And that could mean more money for us if the both of those pass come April 5th. And I,
Just so I
Mhm.
can have clarification, because there was this wonderful ad in the Webster Group of Times recently saying that we're going to impose a new tax on residents through the imposition or for the implementation of Prop U. And so this is not a new tax, correct?
well, it would be a local use tax, a
Tax.
local use internet tax, but it wouldn't be a double tax. And I think that that's important for people to know is that you're not going to be paying sales tax and use
Yeah.
tax. You're either going to be paying sales tax or use tax. So more than half of Missouri cities with populations of 2,000 more already have the use tax in place. And so if approved, we join 200 other cities with a use tax. And I've just outlined some of the ones that are nearby, but Rock Hill, Brentwood, Clayton, Glendale, Kirkwood, Crestwood, De Pere, and Maplewood all have their use tax that passed. We're kind of in line with St. Louis County, Shrewsbury, Baldwin, Town and Country, Chesterfield, St. Peters, Columbia, Missouri. There's, I believe, more than 60 municipalities throughout the state of Missouri that are trying to get this passed in April. So we're in good company, and this is a conversation that's happening in municipalities all over the state, just of people are hearing about it more than just in Webster Groves. Some of the information that we're trying to highlight is the fact that this is very different from the one that was on the April 21 ballot, that there's no self-reporting. All of the work is kind of taken out of a resident's hand. It's just when you buy something, it's already going to be there in the shopping cart when you hit the little cart character. And that we're also promoting that this provides for public services, that the funds received from Prop U are going to go into the general budget fund and can be used for public safety, street, sidewalk maintenance, outdoor recreation opportunities, and other services. But that there's a lot of different services that people have come to count on. We know with the budget that money is tight, and this could, along with the St. Louis County one, bring some more revenue to the city of Webster Groves so that we have more money to spend on these items. We're also promoting that it levels the playing field for businesses. And I think that that's a talking point we've been using so far, that if I were to order diamond earrings on, Blue Nile or something like that, a website that doesn't have an output here in Missouri, I don't have to pay sales tax. So I'm getting them slightly cheaper, which puts Linwoodale, Summit, Fire and Facet at a disadvantage because people feel like they have to pay more money when they buy something. So for the schedule, the informational webpage is up. It, of course, as we do more things get added to it. So, but the informational webpage is up. It is webstergroves.org/propu. There are 2 Webster Kirkwood Times ads that we have, and I've got images of all of these. They've already started running last week. So we'll be doing an ad each week until Election Day. A postcard is mailed this week. It's going to be going out this week or early next week. They've already collected the postcards and the postage money for us. So it's just as it goes out, but that is a postcard that has information. And if you see at the table, I've got the handout version, which is pretty much the same information, but spaced differently so that there's no place to put an address sticker. There's a second postcard that's going to go out the last week of March, right before the election. And that you'll see an image of it. It's slightly different. It talks about Prop U, but it also just highlights Prop W and reminds people that they're voting for mayor and council members as well. So it's kind of an all-encompassing, don't forget to vote for Webster Groves, everything postcard that goes out. Yard signs, we're going to get just a small amount of yard signs in this week. And they're just kind of an awareness sign. I was really pleased. Ours are green. I feel like it's going to stand out among all the other. There's a lot of blue and a lot of orange. So we've got green. And so they'll hopefully be a little bit of a visual notice just for people to pay attention to what it is, look up some research and figure out what they feel on it. It doesn't say to vote yes or no. It just says, this is Prop U. Here's where you can find some more information. And then also social media posts. We're doing those for both Prop U and Prop W. So these are the 2 ads that we've got for Webster Kirkwood Times that are running. One kind of focuses a little bit more on the business community and how that we're helping out them. And then the other one just kind of reiterates that it's not a double tax. This is the postcard that's going out. So as you can see, it's spaced a little bit different. This is the one that's being mailed that is going out this week. And then this is the one that's going out at the end of the month. So it's just that last ditch reminder to really get out there and vote. Don't forget that there's all of these very important things and some directing people to the St. Louis County election information. Yes.
What's on the QR code? Where does it take?
The QR code just takes you to, this takes you to the Prop U website. And I believe that one just takes the all election website, which lists all the candidates. It has the link to the Prop W page and a link to the Prop U page. This is the yard sign. So those are going to be dropped off and they'll be at the side entrance. And then social media posts. We'll be doing some just organic posting of those to raise awareness, but then also some boosted and paid posts of those to just draw people to the Prop U website and where they can get more information. And then I've also created a video that we'll be able to put out on social media. And it's just kind of a little explainer video. And that'll be going out then in the next week or so. And Eric is going to pull that one up.
You're going to do it live, Jen.
Yeah, I
On Tuesday, April 5th, Webster Groves residents will have a chance to vote on a local use tax. So what does that mean? Currently, when you buy something from a brick and mortar store in Webster Groves, the city collects a 1.5% sales tax. But when you buy something online from an out-of-state vendor, the city does not collect a sales tax. If the use tax is approved, those online purchases would be subject to a 1.5% use tax. Why does this matter? Online shopping has become much more prominent. With a use tax, the city's funding sources would better reflect consumer behavior. It is estimated that Webster Groves could collect up to $500,000 a year, allowing the city to more easily balance the budget while providing the services that residents have come to expect. $500,000 could mean 3 additional police officers or firefighters, playground improvements at 4 city parks, or 2 new street sweepers for our Public Works Department. Prop U can provide for public services that residents rely on. To learn more, visit our use tax page at webstergroves.org/propu.
Yeah. Saved a lot of money on that voice.
Voice talent.
It's fantastic. It's good. Yeah. So, and those are just some of the things that we're doing to push out. We're also going to have an explainer video on Prop W that won't have voice. It's just going to be kind of a whiteboard explainer of what Prop W is for the Charter Review Advisory Board. So that's it.
And I'm sure, Jenny, if Katie hasn't received it yet, Preserve Webster Groves will be submitting a sunshine request for the budget of this. So can you explain the historical precedent here in Webster Groves of how the city has expended funds in order to educate voters as to what the propositions are?
Yes, well, and I came to council a few months ago and requested it was a $25,000 budget for the election. And so that money has been spent. It's primarily printing. Print is expensive. Printing a little bit of design work because we use with an outside agency that's worked carefully with Clayton and Brentwood and some of those other municipalities that have gotten Prop U signed. So they had some additional research and some good information that we could use, and they put together those items. Then the video was, that's just done in-house, and some of those other items, we just have to pay a little bit of money for the software. But yeah, so it's all, we try to do as much as we can with a smaller budget. 25,000 was what we had for this time. It'll be, I shouldn't say, but I'll be surprised if we hit 25,000. I think we're going to come under that for sure. And then that money just kind of goes back into the pot to be used for the next project. But
That's an incredible budget that you would do that. It would be interesting to learn after the fact, the number of impressions that we're getting from the campaign and maybe divided by dollars.
yeah, and
so we
with
can see what the
paid advertisement on Facebook, we'll get really good numbers as to how many people have seen the ads, how many people click on the link that we provide in the ads, and so that'll be good to do. There was a certain amount of approvals that you need to go through for Facebook to do political advertising, which I'm sure all you guys that have run for office know, but we did go through that with the city of Webster Grove, so we're approved, and then I'll be able to get those click-through numbers and the amount of people who see things.
And prior to posting, all of these things have been sent to me for review to ensure that we are in compliance with both state and federal law regarding the Hatch Act and regarding limitations that are placed upon municipal government regarding expenditures for informational purposes.
Yeah, I sent Neil the drafts, and then they laid them out and designed them, and we sent him those again, just to make sure. So they've kind of been twice blessed.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I think it's really important that people understand the difference between this time and last time, because it is such a dramatic change in how this operates.
And that's what we're, just trying to push through on the website, and we'll do some social media on that it's not a matter of not listening to people and not taking their vote. And it's a different use tax than the last one was. It's kind of set up differently. It's a little easier for people. And when you see the sheer number of municipalities that are trying to pass it this time, it's clear that everybody's kind of on this one, where last time it wasn't that case.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good job.
Thanks.
Appreciate your work. Thanks, Jenny. All right, we have our last agenda item is board and commission appointments, and we have an opportunity to take a look at the planning commission and determine what's here. So you have your sheet here, and we have Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith, who have asked for reappointment. And then we have other interviewees to consider, and we have 2 openings, correct, Katie?
We have the one vacancy.
Yes.
And then the Hunkins and Smith consideration.
Okay, good.
So this may be putting Katie or Pam on the spot, and I'm sorry if I'm doing that, but because I know we want to balance experience and some new ideas. If I look at this list just from memory, I feel like everybody else is just maybe in their second term at most, and many in their first term. Yeah, of the active members. Sorry, I should have called you and told you that I might ask this question, Katie. I apologize for that. But just going down the list, I mean, I feel like we've confirmed them when I'm on council, and obviously I haven't been around that long, so.
So what you're saying is it might be useful to keep Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith so that we have that balance that Jeff was talking about.
Well, sort of. I wanted to make sure that I understood what the balance might be, really, more than anything else.
So
Again, I apologize for putting you on the spot.
So Michael was appointed in 2020.
Okay.
And Madeline Akila was in 2020. If we're going to put the other active member with the only month was 2020. Christopher Michael was 2018. Scott Moore was 2014. Justin was 2007, and Terry 2015.
And Steve?
And Steve was 2005.
Okay. I mean, I do have definite opinions if you want to hear them, or if you guys want to talk
I do.
more. Well, I would like to, I think we have, I don't think we've really ever
Okay.
not reappointed somebody that is interested in a reappointment. So I would like to go ahead and and have Jeff and Steve stay. I think they're doing a good job. They both have a balanced point of view. And then as far as the new appointee, just from experience of sitting with him on the ARB and in the TIF commission, I think Kyle Wilson would be a good next choice. And I can go on if you want to have more reasons, but that's where I am right now.
Well, let me hear from others.
Okay with Kyle Wilson and the other 2.
I thought we might maybe replace one, just knowing that we had looked at trying to have folks cycle off. periodically or cycle to other commissions, but I also am not on that commission.
Yeah, and Pam is,
Yeah.
yeah, so, okay, so we're talking about reappointing Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith, and then with one vacancy being either Hoteling, Clapper, or Wilson, and you're recommending Mr. Wilson.
The only thing I would say, I'm perfectly fine with the first part of that is when you look at the mix up of the board, we would have 6 males and only 3 females. And I do think that we should take into consideration the makeup of our boards and commissions when we're deciding this and ensuring there's a balance.
So you're suggesting that perhaps we should look at Grace Clapper.
I think that we should not rule her out.
I agree. I agree, always looking for that female representation. So it,
Update me on Grace background again.
well, we interviewed her at a very recent meeting. She comes from
She's a
the,
former naval officer, works for Booz Allen right now in consulting.
yeah,
Sorry, that's all I can remember.
it might be in here somewhere.
I have notes somewhere.
Yeah, let's look and see what's in here. Okay. Let's continue this.
I've got it here if you want. Yeah.
Of course, she was a naval officer, and I believe she currently works for, she does federal consulting. She works with the Department of Defense and Intelligence Community. She has different volunteer experience.
Right.
Refresh me about Mr. Wilson. Katie.
We all know him.
I'm sorry.
You know, I'm also, by the way, while you're looking up Mr. Wilson here,
He's an architect.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
He also has an MBA from Webster University. He's a licensed architect in 14 states, including various other experience.
So we were saying that we wanted to have a balance between the experience and some new ideas. Right, and so if we look at, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4 people that have been on the commission for, well, 2018, 14, 7, and 2015. And I'm sorry, what the reappointments, when were they originally appointed to the board?
Hunkins was 2005, Smith was 2007.
and it looks like we will have another one coming up soon with Mr. Mueller or Miller, however you pronounce that, Scott Miller. So it looks like we have long-term, medium-term, and short-term.
Yes, so I mean, what constitutes long-term? I mean, we're looking at people on here 10 and 15 years, you know, which I'm not saying one way or another, but if we're saying we want a balance and we want some new energy, of course, experience, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that have been in excess, well, just say even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if we do those 2 reappointments, with in excess of 10 years.
Hmm.
And then 3 with 2 years.
Mhm.
So I don't understand how that's balancing experience and new ideas.
You have 2 long-term people on there, Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith. And then you have medium-term people with Ms. Tierney and whatever. And then you have short-term people. So there's kind of a balance there.
Well, and I think it's not just length of time, it's also professional expertise needs to be balanced as well. And, you know, we take off a civil engineer, we don't have a civil engineer there. And I think that's a valuable professional capacity to have on the commission as well.
I agree. Well, if I'm gonna, I'll recommend we try to break this log here with, we have Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith, and taking that concern about female leadership, Grace Clapper. So,
Mr. Smith does offer a lot of experience, and he did an excellent job on the TIF commission.
You mean,
but Wilson's already there. We're not losing him. He's still on the architectural review board. So
Kyle Wilson.
Kyle Wilson, we're not losing him. He's still on the architectural review board, so he's still part of the city.
And the doubling up
Well,
means
as I
we
re-
have less citizen participation in our.
Well, looking down the road, Kyle is an alternate
He probably would like to.
and wanted to spend more time on a commission, and there would be a replacement for him, who I know is someone who's been active in the community and is not yet on a board. So.
What if we appoint Grace Clapper now on the next one? If these two are there, if Clark and Alice are interested, we appoint one of them to the next opening.
And the next vacancy, Katie, is Scott Miller, if he wants to, unless he
come
wants to
back.
reappoint. Yeah.
22 in June. Yeah.
2022 in June.
All right.
Yeah.
Somebody make a motion to appoint Hunkins Smith.
Okay, I'm going to move that we, now I lost the list of names. I got it, thank you. That we move to reappoint Mr. Hunkins and Mr. Smith, and that we appoint Grace Clapper and ask Mr. Hotelian and Mr. Wilson to continue to keep their applications in for future consideration.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Okay, we made that happen. Now, we have, we're going into the regular meeting, but we need a 5-minute break, please. Okay? Thank you. We'll be back at 25 off. Good enough. Good evening. Welcome to our regular city council meeting. We're so sorry the earlier session took so long and we all needed a bit of a break, but we welcome you all here today. Those of you who are here in the chambers with us and all of those folks who are out there with us on Zoom. Again, I remind you that if you're here, you can ask to speak at remarks of visitors. Please put in a speaker card. If you're on Zoom, when we get to remarks of visitors, you just raise your hand and we will call on you to speak. So we'll start tonight with a roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Welch?
Here.
Councilmember Arnold?
Here.
Councilmember Bliss?
Here.
Councilmember Franklin?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Alexander? Here. Councilmember Richardson?
Here.
Great. All right, our first agenda item this evening is a public hearing. And it is on code text amendments, tree preservation and landscape ordinance. And these are proposed amendments, including creating a new chapter 57 tree preservation and landscape requirements through the relocation amendment of regulations in chapter 10 public ways and places, sections 10.300 through 10.385. So just pay attention to the primary parts of this. All right, Mara, you're on.
All right, so Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development for the city. I'm providing you with two different things this evening. We have both a public hearing and then we have a second item that ties directly with the public hearing amendments, but it doesn't require a public hearing. And I'll explain a little bit more why that is the way that it is. So back in 2004, the city undertook a series of meetings, some work sessions and public input to try to address tree preservation and landscaping within the city. That ordinance was approved as Ordinance 8389 in 2004. And it was mainly on trying to raise the standard of care and maintenance for trees within the community. That was put into a code section called Public Ways and Facilities, Chapter 10, Public Ways and Places, which is essentially where everything is for the right-of-way and public works and streets. So then in 2011, after putting some things together, putting a 3-member subcommittee of the city council together, they further discussed because they felt that there were some additional issues and changes in terms of expanding the requirements for preservation and trying to focus a little bit more on just the overall preservation and landscaping of trees within the city on both public and private property. So that ordinance was approved in 2011. It was Ordinance 8719, and everything remained in Chapter 10, Public Ways and Places. So we get now to how the city has been and city staff have been using this code. Because the code is in the public works section, we had a lot of developers who would say, what do you mean there's tree requirements for my lot? What do you mean I'm supposed to provide landscaping? And it was very difficult to try to explain, well, but it's all in this other code that says public ways and places, even though it's for private property. So as we continued over the last few years, we started making a list off to the side. The Parks Department would write down something that they saw that needed to be amended. The Public Works Department would write something down. Some residents would come to us and say, I don't understand how this works. And we'd try to clarify and they'd say, well, it would be clearer if you did X. So we started looking at all those. It took us a few years because other code amendments became more important over the years. So we started probably going on 6 or 7 years ago, thinking that we really needed to update the ordinance. We finally had the time to really address it with all the different code amendments. And what we determined was we needed to take everything that was for the private property and move it into its own separate code so that it was closer to the zoning ordinance where setbacks are, where things are for private development, and separate that from the public ways and places. So if you see up on the screen, we have a series of code sections that we were going to keep in the same place, which is under Chapter 10. They're highlighted in yellow. And we still needed to make some amendments to it, but we wanted to keep it in that location. That does not require a public hearing. But then there's a series of sections that are in green. Those are code sections that if we create a new Chapter 57, which is for all the private development of preserving trees and taking care of new landscaping, we did have to have a public hearing for that. So what we did is we focused primarily on bringing that public hearing before the Plan Commission. We addressed the sections that you can see here in green and then removed out anything that was just public ways and places, and then created 2 separate chapter sections. So what you're seeing before you this evening as a public hearing relates to that particular section. That section was originally reviewed by staff in planning, public works, and parks. We coordinated between all the departments. In addition, the Parks Department brought it before the Green Space Advisory Commission. We held public hearings before the Plan Commission, November of 2021, December of 2021, January of 2022, and February of 2022. We introduced it very slowly, gave them time to digest the information. They gave additional feedback, which we brought back to the various departments. Those departments responded back and added a couple more changes. And it was a vote of 8-0 for recommendation to forward to the City Council. So what I'm going to do, and I apologize, there's not lots of pretty pictures. I don't have pictures of trees in here like the trees of distinction. I have a lot of redlined code sections. So in your packet, you had both a redlined code section for chapter 57, which is the new chapter. You also had a redline code section for chapter 10. Once I get through the public hearing portion, I will go through the chapter 10 so you can see the different things that we're going to do. They do need to follow the same path because if we adopt one and don't adopt the other one at the same time, it's going to cause problems where code sections will no longer be in the code essentially. So the first thing that we focused on was removal of all the right-of-way sections to the code and clarifying titles. There are a number of things in here where wording and language wasn't very correct, and we renumbered it for a new chapter 57. We then focused on definitions, and there's a lot of definitions in this code. The thing that's interesting is some of the definitions actually contained the regulations. So someone would say to me, well, how do I do a preservation plan? And I'd actually like to send them to the definition, which is completely not how you should have that worked. There should be a code section that you follow and not have to say, go look at the definition and it tells you how to apply for a tree preservation permit. So we had some words that also needed to be defined in the code. And then we also found there were some definitions of words that were nowhere else in the code. They were just a definition. So we did try to clean all those things up and update how the code was actually being put in practice. I do have a slide with each of the definition sheets, and I'm going to go through those quickly because you don't really need to, I think, focus on each of them. But before the Plan Commission, we did go through them slide by slide, discussed things like adjusted diameter and how we would change that code, removing things like annual license. We went in and kind of defined and figured out where things like condition factor needed to be if it was in another section of the code. In particular, we tried to focus on things like consistency. The directors' titles and definitions of the directors were different in the code, in the definitions. Making sure the proper titles of what people were in the city was important. And we did try to make sure, so things like park superintendent is really the person who works through the Parks Department on this, making sure that was consistent through the code. And then making sure that things that would need to be in this section versus the chapter 10 were clarified between the two. There is an overlap between the two, and we want to make sure that those definitions are the same. And you'll see these really large sections like tree specialist. There was a whole section in here about what was in a tree preservation plan instead of it being in the code. It was under tree specialist. So we cleaned all of that up. And it was a pretty extensive set of definitions, but we fixed the definitions in both code sections. The other thing that was interesting in here is the Green Space Advisory Commission was listed as being basically the starter and in charge of policy, which as a commission, they can't be in charge of like the policy of how the city operates these things. So we did want to pull that out. We still want to be it's very important for us to collaborate with them. And so we changed it a little bit more to state that we would still collaborate with them. They would still review any changes that we make in the future, but they wouldn't be the ones to start those changes. Those changes would be started by the council or by staff in consultation with the council.
And Mara, I assume that's part of what you talked about the Green Space Advisory Commission with during this process?
Yes,
So
so
they understand why that's changing and how it's changing?
yes, and because the code still said that it started with them, we did start our conversations with them.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And it has been a little while since they talked with them because again, this has been ongoing for a couple of years. But Yvonne does keep them in the loop. Department head duties, we wanted to make it consistent. There were some oddities between having like the park manager had a whole list of duties, but really it should have been under the Parks Department, the Public Works Department, and the Planning Department. So we clarified those. It also had nothing related to finance and administration. And that was pretty important for us to deal with finance and administration because that is who issues licenses for tree companies and for the tree specialist. We added a section for licensing and registration. So when we do tree preservation plans, it's not the same as just doing a landscape plan or saying we're going to take a tree down. The tree preservation plans are supposed to look at the condition of the trees, the factor of the trees, whether there might be impact when there's construction to their root zone, and then protecting trees on neighboring properties as construction is ongoing. And so one of the things that had been done as a practice over the years is that the tree specialist had to show the city that they knew how to do the plan properly. And so we had a short list, but we didn't have an official registration listed in the code. It talked about how you registered a tree company, but it didn't talk about how you registered the specialist. So we did add that in the code. They register one time only, and then they stay registered until such time as it's determined that maybe either that they don't have the staff on able to do the plan. It is someone that is a arborist that understands how to perform a tree preservation plan. And we're not the only city in the region who requires tree preservation plans. So there is a consistency where our staff talk with staff in other communities to confirm some of the consistency of how we operate and ask for tree preservation plans.
So Mara, are we licensing individuals or companies, or can it be one or the other?
We've been doing it as companies.
Okay.
And then we've been coordinating with, they do have to put their licensure on their letter. So we do know who it is from that company who is providing the plan and signing off on the plan.
Okay.
We then moved, this was all in the definitions, the tree preservation plan, what they were supposed to provide, how they were supposed to provide it, what the professionals would show. The other thing that we had to add, there had been a section in here that said that there was a waiver, that you could get a tree waiver, that if for some reason, either the property already had a fence around it and wasn't anywhere near any trees, or there were no trees, or you were able to focus your construction in the front yard and nothing was impacting the backyard, or you offered to put up an orange fence to keep all your contractors from getting into the backyard area. We had it in there, but there was no actual application for a waiver. There wasn't really a process for how to fill out a waiver. And we were getting more and more waiver requests in, and it was hard to explain to them what we needed. So we wanted to make sure that there was definitely a waiver in here because it is an important part of the process. And so we did add a permit waiver in, and we also wanted to make sure to clarify the tree replacement regulations. So in here, we had a special thing about when it was applicable to require to get a permit. We tried to focus a little bit more on how the code sections applied, so that when the permit review came in or the tree permit waiver came in, people knew what to expect. The three departments have coordinated and have one application, no matter whether it's trees being removed from the right of way that they're requesting, whether it's trees being removed because they have just purchased the property, whether it's through demolition, whether it's through new construction of a brand new house. So we tried to clarify that and talked through what the applicability was, what the waiver would be. And we have been applying that waiver over the last couple of years. So we've tweaked a little bit more what we needed to make sure that we can give those waivers out when they're necessary. The other thing that we clarified, the Plan Commission reviewed this and were confused, and we realized that we hadn't been as clear on this. We wanted to clarify, so the code has always said that if you've lived there for less than a year, you can get permission to take trees down. However, it wasn't completely clear of, oh, if someone buys a house and they're gutting the interior and they're putting a dumpster out there and putting all their materials out, that they do need to get a tree preservation, either waiver or permit, to protect the trees, both in neighbors and themselves. In that first year, that's usually, it's not always a resident, sometimes it is. And if it is and they qualify for a waiver, we've been giving waivers. But a lot of times in those first 12 months, it's someone who has purchased the property to renovate, to resell. We get a lot of complaints from neighbors after the fact because their trees have been damaged or the contractors put the dumpster in the yard on top of the root zone. And so we tried to clarify this, that it's property owners that have owned the property for less than 12 months and apply for a building permit to do construction would be required to either obtain the waiver or obtain a tree preservation permit. That way it just tried to be a little bit more clear on what was already in the code, but was very hard to understand. We did a little bit more information on how to replace trees. So sometimes people don't understand the way the code works. If you have 30 inches of trees that are being removed from your property, when you take in the type, the caliper, and the condition, it might then mean you only need to plant 10 caliper inches back. So if you then have those 10 caliper inches, we don't usually want you to plant more than a 2.5 inch caliper tree. If it gets too much larger, it's pretty hard to keep it alive. So if you think with a 2.5 inch caliper tree for 10 inches, you need to plant 5 trees. On some of our lots, planting 5 trees makes no sense. Maybe they plant one in the backyard, maybe they plant one in the front yard, and then they can't plant the rest. So we have a combination of things that they can do, and the code used to make it seem like it was an either or. Either you pay $800, you don't plant any more trees, and then you're just done, and that $800 goes into a tree fund. But then the other option is you can plant the trees. And so we wanted to make sure that it was pretty clear that it was an either or, that you could do both a combination of the two. You could plant 2 trees and then only pay $120 into the fund because you only had like another inch left to go, or however that could come together. But we do still have a tree replacement in there. We also, in consultation, and I believe it was from Green Space, but Yvonne would know better, and I apologize, I should have asked her this question. We found out from a lot of developers that the $800 wasn't much for if you're going to clear, they could just clear the site, because once you hit that $800 mark, it's capped and you don't have to pay anymore. And so the conversation was that $1,200 was a little bit more, that might encourage a little bit more trees to be planted. And then it's still that combination of the two. And we might not lose as many trees on an existing site. And so that tied in and was trying to focus that again, only for single family residential property. If it needs a certain amount, it would not exceed $1,200 per lot versus $800 per lot. There were also a lot of things in the landscape plan, tried to clarify that down of when the landscape plan was needed. People got really confused thinking that a single family home needed a landscape plan. We don't require that. There was also a lot of confusion when it said the words site plan in the code. We tried to clarify that site plans that go to Plan Commission are the only site plans, because people give us a site plan for lots of projects, but they're not a approved site plan through Plan Commission. So we tried to update the plan content. We went through and looked at some of the details about how to make it really clear. We asked for additional feedback on how to provide clarification to the code. We looked at the landscape design standards, tried to clarify that the design objective of how it would be designed is to provide seasonal color and interest. So bringing back the roots of what this tree ordinance was supposed to be from the very beginning. Talking a little bit about buffering between commercial and residential. That's a call we get a lot when someone is up against a commercial property. When are they required to put in landscaping? When are they required to put in buffering? So trying to make sure that that was clear in the code. We also had a number of things that were in other sections of the code in odd places. We tried to put it all under the landscape design standards, so they were all in one place. And we continued again with the buffering requirements, helping to clarify that it used to just say residentially zoned property and talked about whether it was commercial or mixed use. So we tried to talk about when it was a new development coming in, that it would need to provide that new buffering requirement. And then we had some discrepancies with the fines versus what the court could uphold if someone was taken all the way to court with a summons for clear cutting a lot without any permission and just coming in and tearing everything out. And we tried to provide some additional information on the landscaping escrow that's required. So the escrow used to say that so for example, if you were doing a brand new construction project at Webster University and you were putting in $100,000 worth of landscaping, you had to put in a escrow of $125,000 that we had to keep for 2 years to make sure that the landscaping didn't die. It made no sense. The entire project is never going to die. So we have reduced that down to 50%, which is pretty consistent with other communities. They are able to do it as a bond. And with some of the larger things like the university, when they go from project to project to project, they've just been rolling that over from project to project. So we did try to clarify that. That was a very large amount that was unnecessary. And then we again cleared up the removal of discrepancies and fines, clarified the timing for holding sureties and when we could release sureties back to homeowners and back to developers. And then prohibited acts, tried to clarify what it meant to take down existing trees without permission when you've lived there for less than 12 months. And then we did provide an appeals section. There was no specific appeals section to appeal to any of our determinations in the private section of the code because it had been in public ways and places. They didn't have the same kind of appeals. So we wanted to make sure there was an appeals section so they had an opportunity if they disagreed with something in the code that they could appeal it. So that covers, before I get into chapter 10, any questions about chapter 57? Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question regarding the tree removal and the tree fund. So the tree replacement, so that if you're removing a tree and you either plant more or you pay the $1,200 fee, is that for developers only or is that for private residents as well?
That is for anyone who is removing trees when they are demolishing an entire house, rebuilding an entire new house. And then it also is if you have lived there for less than a year and are taking a certain amount out. So it could be for a homeowner. Many times, it's very rare that it's for homeowners. It's usually when someone has lived there for less than a year and they are reselling the house. The numbers have come out to be very, very few. Usually when it's a homeowner who's been there for less than a year and they're doing a new project, they plant a couple trees because they're going to be living there for a number of years.
And even in those instances, is there consideration for the condition of the tree? So
yes, so that's part of the tree preservation plan. If the condition of the tree and the tree factor, so there's a whole chart that is reviewed both, they hire a tree consultant, a tree specialist who creates the chart that shows the condition of the tree, this type of the tree, because some types of trees are not worth very much. There's trees of heaven and other things like that that are dead or dying. It is put into that chart. We have someone from the city who goes and verifies that they agree with the assessment. So it covers both the owner of the property or the developer of the property, as well as the city on both accounts. And if the tree should die within the 2 years, there's a deposit that they put down that they get back if everything is still in good condition. And it is very rare that we don't return that amount. So there's the deposit that we return, but then there is the amount if they are going to take out certain trees. So again, if there's 30 inches and a number of like one tree is in very, very bad, almost dying condition, it won't count. There won't be an amount you have to put back in. We also only review trees over 8 inches in caliper. So 8 inches at chest height, not down at the base of the tree. And so that does reduce the number. There's a lot of trees on people's sites that are less than that, and they don't get counted in the overall numbers.
Thank you.
So Mara, there's a whole lot in here. And if anyone watched the last 20 minutes and you're a homeowner who has owned your home for more than a year, what is the headline about how their life might change as a homeowner in Webster Groves?
Nothing changes.
Her to say it. I
Yes.
just wanted her to say the
So
words.
anyone who has lived here for a year can take down every tree on their lot should they wish to. They can plant as many trees as they want, as they wish to. They have the opportunity to do whatever they want on their own property regarding trees and landscaping.
And so it is a myth when people say the city won't let me take down a tree on my own property.
Completely a myth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I'll just briefly go through, this is not the public hearing, so I don't know if you want to see if there's any other public hearing questions or just finish this little
Why
piece
don't you
out.
finish this up and then we'll see what kind
Okay.
of questions we have.
So in the chapter 10 Public Works Code, very similar to before, we're removing the private property sections, which is a much bigger section, clarifying a new title, which is public tree and landscape or requirements, and renumbering it for chapter 10. We removed all the sections of the private property definitions that weren't needed and updated it to how it was being put in practice. We continued to update green space advisory because I think it's important to keep them in both the things that are in right-of-way and parks as well as what's on private. We clarified the department head duties again, because even with public right-of-way, my department as well as Public Works and Parks all work together when there are issues with right-of-way or in the parks. We removed all the code sections, so there was pages and pages of stuff that was related to private landscaping and doing landscaping. We updated the prohibited acts. When we went on the private side, the prohibitive acts were kind of small. When you go to the right-of-way, there's a much larger grouping of prohibited acts that stay because it's related to damaging trees on public property, damaging trees in parks, and doing other things related to the right-of-way. So those are all staying. And then this last slide is just to remind you, so for chapter 57, next steps, the next step would be to, if you have all of your issues addressed, close this hearing. And then you want to hold the first and second readings on both of them. And then at some point vote on them simultaneously so that both of those, there's 2 ordinances, but then they will work together to make sure that everything is integrated.
Right. So now it's time for questions from the council as well as from the public. So we'll ask, is there anybody in the audience who has a question? Is there anybody on the Zoom that has a question or comment? Okay, let's go.
Jessica, go ahead and unmute.
So can I? Hello?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Do I have to make a comment to what was already stated, or can I bring up like something else that I would like to talk about at another meeting?
No, if it's related to the preservation and landscape ordinances and the public hearing, this is the time to make that comment. If you have a comment on something that's unrelated, we'll call on you at remarks of visitors, which is next.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's what I need to do.
So, council, questions?
For me, Mayor.
Nope.
This was quite the undertaking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
it is quite the
I know it's been on
undertaking.
your list for a long time too.
It is the undertaking.
On a very, very long time.
You know, and it really came from trying to prevent clear cutting of property so that somebody would come in and buy a house and clear cut the entire lot. And there are loopholes, as we know, for that too. So, all right. Well, if there are no questions or issues, then I will call on Mr. Bruntrager to close this hearing.
This hearing would be closed, and before it is closed, I would move for the admission of the following exhibits. This is the exhibit list for ordinance 9181. First is the Plan Commission staff report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, for the meeting date November 8th, 2021, with the following attachments. Existing Chapter 10 Public Ways and Places, Article 4, Tree and Landscape Ordinance, Sections 10.300 through 10.385 of the Webster Grove City Code. Plan Commission report prepared by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, for the meeting dated December 13th, 2021, with the following attachments being the same as the one I just read. Plan Commission staff report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, for the meeting date January 10th, with the following attachments. A draft red line of the proposed amendments to the new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Regulations, a draft of the proposed amendments to the new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Regulations with all changes accepted, draft red line of the proposed amendments to Chapter 10 Public Ways and Places, draft of the the proposed amendments to Chapter 10 Public Ways and Places with all changes accepted. Next would be the Plan Commission report by Mara Perry, Director of Planning and Development, for meeting date February 7th, 2022, with the following attachments. Again, the draft red line and blue line of the proposed amendments to the new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Regulations, a draft of the proposed amendments of the new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Regulations with all changes accepted. Minutes of the November 8th, 2021, December 13th, 2021, January 10th, 2022, and February 7th, 2022 Plan Commission meetings. March 15th, 2022, red line draft code amendments and full version accepting all changes. Director of Planning and Development's PowerPoint before the City Council this day, March 15th, 2022. And finally, the zoning code of the City of Webster Groves. I would ask for the admission of all of those exhibits.
Thank you. And with that, this public hearing is closed, and we'll go to Bill 9181, Council Member Richardson.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9181.
Second.
Bill 9181, first reading. An ordinance creating a new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Requirements through the relocation and amendment of regulations in Chapter 10 Public Ways and Places, Sections 10.300 through 10.385, and repealing ordinances 8389 and 8719 and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions, issues, or recommended changes? If not, let's do that second reading.
Bill 9181, second reading. An ordinance creating a new Chapter 57 Tree Preservation and Landscape Requirements through the relocation and amendment of regulations in Chapter 10 Public Ways and Places, Section 10.300 through 10.385, and repealing ordinances 8389 and 8719 and matters related thereto.
All right, we'll go to Bill 9182, Councilmember Smith.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9182.
Second.
Bill 9182, first reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 4, Tree and Landscape Ordinance, Sections 10.300 through 10.355 and matters related thereto.
Any questions, issues, or changes? Let's do the second reading.
Bill 9182, second reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 4, Tree and Landscape Ordinance, Sections 10.300 through 10.355 and matters related thereto.
All right, we'll move on to remarks of visitors, and I have one speaker card from Mr. Buck. Dave, come forward.
Evening, Council, Mayor. Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. Now for something completely different. The city is conducting a number of surveys, as you know. So you may be interested in an annual national survey of thousands of American adults that includes this question: what's missing in your life? And every year among the top answers are love, relationship, success, money, time, energy, sleep, sustainability. But year after year, the number one answer by far is fun. Fun is fundamental to all of us. Now, today is March 15th. Beware the Ides of March, which marked the end of Julius Caesar because he risked destroying the Roman Empire. So starting tonight, why don't all of us mark the end of the division, dishonesty, meanness, and negativity that risk destroying all that's good in our community by bringing people together, having fun, and yes, singing. Webster grows, I'm home again grows to put the sun back in the sky. Webster grows, I'm home again grows about 1,000 smiles high. Ding dong ding, I can hear the church bells chime. Ding dong ding, at the least suggestion, I'll pop the question. Webster grows, I'm home again grows, without a problem to my name. Webster grows, how everyone knows that I am hoping you're the same. So here is my love song, not fancy or fine. Webster grows, oh, won't you be our Webster grows, our Webster grows, our Webster grows. And our summer of fun is coming and includes, after a 2-year absence, Webster on Wheels. After a 2-year absence, the Webster Art Fair. And after a 2-year absence, Jazz and Blues Fest. Woo-hoo! If we can all just come together, we can end, and I'm being perfectly serious, the destructive division and instead reignite, inspire, and unleash peaceful unity in our community once again. All it takes is a little fun.
You are a treasure. Okay, let's see what we have on Zoom. We have, I think, Jessica, do we not? Okay, Jessica Kreckler, now you can bring up whatever you want.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I just want to bring up, I recently had my car stolen from my driveway. And I will just tell you, before that, we caught people trying to go through our cars. We reported that to the police. We also had an incident where guys jumped the fence between my house and my neighbor's house. They actually broke her fence. And then when they jumped our fence, they came to our bedroom window, shine the flashlight into the window, you know, for a minute or so, and then they ran off. But I belong to the Webster Groves Community Connection on Facebook. I also belong to the neighborhood app. So we see constantly, every day, every week, every month, issues of crime in our neighborhood. And repeatedly, every week, every month, every other day, there are comments, where are our police? We love our police, we love our firemen, we never see them. We are continually vandalized, continually robbed, continually, we've had 4 cars stolen in a 1-mile vicinity of my house in the past 2 months. It is uncalled for, it is unnecessary, and we have the tools right at our fingertips if we could only get some things done. You know, we don't have enough officers to sit on every street corner to monitor everyone who's coming in and out of our neighborhoods. We don't have the dollars to do that either. The police can't go up and down every single one of our streets every single hour of every single day. They can't do that. There's not enough people. But what can be done is we can have cameras at the entrances of our neighborhoods. We could have cameras at the major intersections in our neighborhoods. We could have cameras at the on-ramps to 44. We could have cameras at the corner of Watson and Edgar, or Watson and Laclede, so that we can see the cars that are coming and going from these neighborhoods that belong to us and have been stolen. Now, this has been brought up before, and the response has been, there's an invasion of privacy and we can't do that. I disagree wholeheartedly. You can literally watch me walk around my house. I don't care. You know what? Because if it's going to keep the neighbors safe, by all means, do it. I think it needs to be, the victims and the people who are constantly harassed and constantly being tormented by what's happening to them or their neighbor. It's up to us to decide if we want to have a camera in our neighborhoods.
Jessica, thank you very much. And we're letting you go over the time because I think we can hear in your voice that this is a really tough and emotional situation for you. I'm going to ask the police chief to get in touch with you and the police
We've been
department.
in communication, and I appreciate that. We have been in communication, and he supports my idea. I've got several other neighbors who also support my idea. It's not just a conversation with the police chief. I think that this is a fair conversation for the neighbors, my neighbors, the neighborhoods, for everyone to have. If your car was stolen from your neighborhood and your neighbor's car and that neighbor's car and the next neighbor's car, would you not want to know who's coming and going from your neighborhood?
Yes, and we will not let this drop. I assure you, we will not let this drop. And I think this council will be happy to talk further with you and perhaps with the police department and see what we can do. I have noticed the posts too of this particular neighborhood being hit quite a few times. And so let's see what we can do to have a conversation about doing something that might help you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Curtis, in my neighborhood, in my house, I have a Ring doorbell. And my doorbell spans to the 4 houses that's just north of my house. And they have Ring doorbells that spans over my side of the street. So we're covered. My backyard Ring catches 2 houses over. So we have a coverage, with cameras. And if I remember correctly, I looked maybe 3-4 years ago, there's a special program that neighborhoods can enlist in. They give them discounted rates on Ring. And then you can even give the police the access to your internet. That's how can we gonna attack that issue on my street. And so we got it at the beginning, going all the way down to the middle of the street. So anytime anybody approaches my house, I get a notification.
Thank you. I don't think we want to identify it. All right, we're not going to identify it. It is tough, but I don't think we will leave this drop, and we'll pick up on this tomorrow with something perhaps, Jessica, that we can do to give you a hand here. Thank you. Are there any more hands up? Okay. All right, then we're going to move on to the unfinished business. Councilmember Bliss, could you call for Bill 9180, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill 9180 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9180, third reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending the code of Webster Groves, Missouri by repealing Chapter 4, Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, and repealing ordinance 9039, 9132, and 9160.
Are there any questions or issues? If not, we'll call for the vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. All right. Bill 9180 has been approved and does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, Councilwoman Arnold.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Lo.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
All right, this evening, we've made a couple of appointments to boards and commissions. We've reappointed Mr. Steve Hunkins and Mr. Jeff Smith and appointed Grace Clapper to the board. And we're going into executive closed session. So Councilwoman Arnold, here we go.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session under number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren, closed paren.
Second.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Lo.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we are going to go into closed session. And so we thank all of you for coming this evening to join us.